Hi everyone and welcome to Beyond Node.js, a space where we explore the ideas and real-world insights behind Node.js and the dev ecosystem. Today we are joined by Ulises. He is maintainer of some of the most widely JavaScript tools, Node.js, Express, Lodash, Yeoman, and also he is TC39 Delegate and Senior Software Engineer at NodeSource. Ulises, it's great to have you here. To get started, what is the worst thing you ever seen in a production Node.js application?
Well, I think one of the worst things that I saw in Node.js production applications most of the time is how the people do the error handling, especially when you're using events, right? Most of the time, the people forget about the on-error events and these kind of things, so you don't have the right mechanisms to prevent your application from crashing or it's behave in a ways that you don't expect, right? That's a common thing, common pitfall. Also, a very common thing is when you're not used to work with asynchronous mechanisms and stuff like that. So you end up, for example, don't catching promises and things like that, which also is also part of the error handling. And I will say also that some people try to abuse a lot on the sync methods. So you end up, for example, writing sync on the disk and stuff like that, and you end up blocking the application unintendedly. So that's also a bad experience, and it happened. I think nowadays it's more easy because we have better mechanisms to handle asynchronous and stuff. But in the past, it was more prone to errors, especially when we just started to use callbacks and stuff like that, like in the old days of the Node.js application. And I see a bunch of these errors in production, and sometimes it's a nightmare to debug this kind of thing. So yeah, depends a lot. But yeah, highly recommended for who is watching this. Always try to do the error handling, please, and try to use the right mechanisms when you are doing synchronous operations, and try to prioritize asynchronous operations when it makes sense for you.
What's the best feature Node.js has had in the past year, and why does it matter?
Well, for me personally, I think one of the most relevant things that Node 25 added, in my case, was fine-grained network control with a low net tag, basically, so you can have a more security around your services, especially if you are running microservices and you are, having a specific rules for networking and communication. I think it's an important feature, so you don't have to depend on external things for doing that, which was the use case in the past. I think also in terms of passive gains as well, we have now a better implementation of JSON Stringify because the version of V8. So basically also you get a lot of boost in performance. A lot of things are using JSON Stringify under the hood. So that's also a good important thing. And I will say from the last years, probably the most important things for me in terms of features that I wanted was the test runner, definitely. I started to use the Node.js test runner natively a lot. I migrated a lot of from a lot of test runner in the past, and I started to use native one. It was a really nice relief. And I think also like having the option to read the environmental file directly from Node.js, that's just a great win. So we avoid to have another library. I think that was a good addition from the last years. Yeah, I think those are my favorite ones. I think recently made by Nodes. But yeah, that was a big win for us.
What's one common misconception about Node.js in production?
Well, I think one of the, especially for me as an open source maintainer, one of the common misconceptions about Node.js in production is how much you depend on open source projects and libraries. Node.js, in most Node.js projects, we see a lot of dependencies, even if just transitive dependencies. So you end up needing to be involved somehow on the ecosystem in order to get an idea of how are your dependencies, what you're dependent on, build good relationship with maintainers, and so on. Not everybody is doing that, and I think that's a pitfall in many ways. I think if you start to getting more involved with the community and what is around, you are going to get a more understanding on your dependencies, and you can have build a better trust with your own dependencies. It's very hard to survive in Node.js without having a lot of dependencies. Even now with the Node.js runtime getting much more built-in stuff, so you depend on less things, but you still need a lot of frameworks, libraries, and so on. I mean, we're trying to build a lot of complex projects that require a lot of dependencies, and I think it's important to get a good relationship. I think in the past was more like about technical concepts on Node.js because it was a new way of doing things in the backend mostly of the time. So a lot of people didn't understand the single thread work, didn't understand a lot of the ecosystem, how to do this backend now work, right? When people migrate from other systems. And now it's more about how you have a better relationship with the ecosystem and how you understand your own dependencies and how you get involved with those, I think.
And the last question, what's the most valuable feature of NSolid for production teams?
This is a great question. Actually, probably one of the features that I like the most is the simplicity. We try to subestimate how hard it is to get telemetry working on Node.js applications. Sometimes you need to rely on third parties, you need to get somehow this orchestrated and get this telemetry flow into a dashboard, something where you can get this info, right? So the good thing of NSolid is you have already that with the Node.js, and you don't have to include any additional external library and so on. So you can go just with this node fork, which is NSolid with all the telemetry layer on it. So you don't have to worry about that. And you automatically can get these metrics showing in the dashboard. So that option to see this information faster, I think, is one of the best way when you start to get on board on this, right? Because sometimes if you are not used to use, this performance tooling, monitoring tooling, and so on, is the day you need this kind of tool is the day that you are stuck on a memory leak or on a big bug that you cannot resolve with your own tooling, your existing tooling, right? And you need to jump to a new technology to help you. So I think that is one of the best features that we have, that is super easy just to change Node.js for NSolid and run your application, and you will get the metrics and you will understand what's going on, right? Including the flame graphs and everything. So it's very easy to start solving the problem. I think that auto onboarding easy makes a lot of our customers very happy, I think, over the time. And it's one of the best entryways for many people into the performance universe and to metrics and so on, is when you get a real problem and you need something to figure out how to solve, right?
That was amazing, Ulises. Thank you so much for being here. And thanks everyone for watching Beyond Node.js. See you in the next episode.